The mining station hung in space like a broken tooth, its hull scarred by micrometeorites and neglect. Joran Kane guided his modified freighter Wanderer through the debris field, surrounding Kepler-4 to see, following a distress beacon that had been broadcasting for 3 days. Most traders avoided this sector too remote, too dangerous, too likely to end up as another cautionary tale whispered in station cantinas. But Joran had never been most traders. The beacon source materialized on his sensors, Station Omega-7, officially abandoned 6 months ago when the mining consortium pulled out. Unofficially, it had become a haven for smugglers, pirates, and worse. Whatever had triggered that distress signal, Joran doubted it was anything legal. Just a quick look, he muttered to himself, adjusting his ship's approach vector. In and out. The Wanderer shuddered as he brought her into the station's docking bay, the magnetic clamps engaging with a grinding protest. Through the viewport, Joran could see signs of recent violent scorch marks on the walls. Debris scattered across the deck plating. His hand instinctively moved to the plasma pistol at his hip. The station's atmosphere was breathable but stale, tasting of recycled air and fear. Emergency lighting cast everything in harsh red shadows as Joran made his way through the corridors. Following his scanner toward the beacon source, the silence was oppressive, broken only by the distant hum of life support systems running on backup power. He found the first body near the central hub, a human male in miner's coveralls. Plasma burns across his chest, then another, and another. Whatever had happened here, it had been swift and brutal. The beacon led him deeper into the station, toward what had once been the residential section. Here the signs of battle were more pronounced, blast marks on the walls, overturned furniture, the acrid smell of discharged weapons. Joran moved carefully, his pistol drawn, every nerve alert for danger. The sound reached him first a low, pained gasp echoing from around the corner. Joran pressed himself against the wall, peering cautiously into the next corridor. What he saw made his breath catch. She was unlike anything he'd ever encountered, tall and lithe, with skin that shifted between deep purple and silver depending on the angle of the light. Her hair was white as starlight, flowing and impossibly delicate, strands that seemed to move with their own current. Most striking were her eyes, large and luminous, the color of nebulae. Filled with pain and defiant fury, she was fighting for her life. 3 syndicate raiders surrounded her, their crude armor marked with the skull and crossbones symbol that struck fear into colonists across the frontier. The alien, for that's what she clearly was, held a slender energy weapon that pulsed with each shot. But Joran could see she was weakening. Her movements were slower than they should be, her aim slightly off. Dark fluid that might have been blood stained her form-fitting combat suit. One of the raiders laughed, a harsh sound that echoed off the metal walls. Just give up. Pretty one. Make this easy on yourself. The alien's response was to put a bolt of energy through his shoulder, spinning him around. But the effort cost her. She stumbled, nearly falling, and the remaining raiders pressed their advantage. Joran didn't think. He simply acted. His first shot took the leftmost raider in the head, dropping him instantly. The second spun toward this new threat, but Joran was already moving, diving behind an overturned table as return fire sparked off the walls around him. Behind you, he called to the alien. She understood immediately, despite the language barrier. As the remaining raider turned to face Joran's position, she put her final shot center mass, dropping him beside his companions. Silence fell over the corridor like a blanket. Joran rose slowly from cover, his weapon still ready but no longer aimed. The alien regarded him with those incredible eyes, her chest rising and falling with exhaustion. Up close, he could see the delicate patterns that traced across her skin, not tattoos, but something organic, like bioluminescent veins that pulsed faintly with her heartbeat. "Thank you," she said in accented but clear standard. Her voice was melodious, with harmonic undertones that suggested vocal cords very different from human ones. "Are you hurt?" Joran asked, holstering his pistol and approaching cautiously. Trust was earned slowly in the outer systems, especially between species. She gestured to her left side, where the combat suit had been torn, revealing a gash that leaked that dark fluid. "Nothing fatal." "I've had worse." Joran pulled out his basic medkit, offering it to her. I'm Joran Kane, independent trader. You? Nix Valdris, she replied, accepting the kit with a nod of gratitude. Scout for the Ethereal Collective. Her fingers worked with practiced efficiency, applying a sealant patch to her wound. I was investigating reports of syndicate activity in this sector when they ambushed my ship, the Collective. Joran raised an eyebrow. The Ethereal Collective was one of the more mysterious alien governments, known for their advanced technology and strict isolationist policies. You're a long way from home. Nix's expression darkened. The syndicate has been raiding our outer settlements. My people want to know why. She tested the patch, wincing slightly. What brings a human trader to this forsaken place? Your distress beacon. I was in the area when it started broadcasting. Joran glanced around at the carnage. Looks like you've had quite a day. They were waiting for me, Nix said, her voice tight with anger. Someone told them I was coming. Before Joran could respond, the station shuddered around them. Through the viewport at the end of the corridor, they could see lights approaching, more ships, moving with the predatory grace of hunters who had found fresh prey. Friends of yours? Joran asked dryly. Nix checked her weapon's charge level and grimaced. The rest of their pack. We need to leave. Now, my ship's in docking bay 7. Joran said, already moving. Can you run? I can fly if I have to, Nix replied, matching his pace despite her injury. They ran through the station's twisting corridors as the first sounds of docking reached them, metallic clangs, and the hiss of airlocks cycling. Behind them, harsh voices shouted orders in the guttural syndicate dialect. The Wanderer waited where Joran had left her, her engines still warm. He palmed the access panel, and the boarding ramp descended with a pneumatic whine. Get strapped in, he called to Nix as they rushed aboard. This might get rough. She slid into the co-pilot's seat with fluid grace, her long fingers dancing over the unfamiliar controls. Your ship, she's beautiful. She's home, Joran replied, bringing the engines online. And she's fast. Hold on. The Wanderer shot out of the docking bay like a bullet from a gun, her modified engines screaming as they accelerated away from the station. Behind them, syndicate fighters were launching in pursuit, their weapon systems already charging. Can they catch us? Nix asked, monitoring the sensor displays with professional interest. Joran's hands moved over the controls with practiced ease, coaxing every ounce of speed from his ship. Not if I have anything to say about it. The first energy bolts flashed past the viewport, close enough to feel their heat through the transparent aluminum. Joran threw the ship into a spiraling dive toward the planet's surface, using its gravity, to build speed while making them a harder target. Impressive flying, Nix observed, seemingly unperturbed by the death streaking past them. I've had practice, Joran grunted, pulling up just before they would have kissed the planet's atmosphere. The pursuing fighters weren't so lucky. Two of them clipped the upper atmospheric layers and went spinning out of control. As they raced toward the edge of the system, Joran stole glances at his unexpected passenger. Nix Valdris was clearly more than just a scout. Her tactical awareness and calm under fire spoke of serious military training, but there was something else about her, something that made his pulse quicken in ways that had nothing to do with their current danger. Why did you help me? She asked suddenly, turning those luminous eyes on him. Joran considered the question as he plotted their jump to hyperspace. Seemed like the right thing to do. Most humans would have left an alien to face syndicate raiders alone. I'm not most humans. Nix studied him for a long moment, and Joran felt as if she were seeing straight through to his soul. No, she said finally, a hint of something like wonder in her voice. I don't think you are. The jump to hyperspace engaged with a low thrum that vibrated through the ship's hull. In the swirling blue-white tunnel of folded space, they were safe, at least for now. Joran looked at Nix, taking in her exotic beauty and the fierce intelligence in her eyes. He had the distinct feeling that saving her life was going to complicate his in ways he couldn't even imagine. But as she smiled at him, an expression of such warmth and gratitude that it seemed to light up the cockpit, he found he didn't care about complications. Some things were worth the risk. The Wanderer drifted in the void between star systems, her engines powered down to minimal levels to avoid detection. In the cramped engine compartment, Joran cursed softly as another shower of sparks erupted from the damaged power coupling. The Syndicate fighters hadn't landed any direct hits, but the stress of their escape had pushed his ship's aging systems beyond their limits. "Hand me that plasma welder," he called to Nix, who was perched gracefully on a nearby crate, watching him work with those mesmerizing eyes. She passed him the tool, their fingers brushing in the exchange. Even through his work gloves, Joran felt a tingle of electricity at the contact. Over the past 6 hours, he'd noticed other things about her too, the way she moved with liquid grace. Despite her injury, how her skin seemed to shimmer with its own inner light. The musical quality of her laugh when he'd made a particularly colorful comment about Syndicate. "Parentage, your ship is older than she appears," Nix observed, running her hand along the bulkhead. "But well maintained. You care for her." "She's been with me for 8 years, Joran replied, focusing on the delicate repair work. "Saved my life more times than I can count. A ship like this. She's not just a machine, she's a partner." Nix nodded approvingly. "Among my people, we have a similar bond with our vessels. They're grown rather than built, formed from living crystal that responds to our thoughts and emotions." "Sounds incredible," Joran said, genuinely interested. "I'd love to see one someday." Something flickered across Nix's expression, pain, perhaps, or regret. That may not be possible. The collective does not welcome outsiders, even ones who save the lives of their scouts, especially then. Her voice carried a weight of old sadness. "My people are protective of our isolation. They believe contact with other species weakens us, makes us vulnerable to corruption." Joran set down the welder and turned to face her fully. "And what do you believe?" Nix was quiet for a long moment, her luminous eyes distant. "I believe," she said finally, "that isolation is just another kind of prison." Before Joran could respond, the ship's proximity alarms began blaring. He bolted for the cockpit, Nix close behind, moving with that fluid grace despite her injury. The sensor display showed multiple contacts dropping out of hyperspace Syndicate ships, at least a dozen of them moving in a search pattern. "How did they find us so quickly?" Nix breathed. Joran's hands flew over the controls, bringing weapons and shields online. "They must have tagged us during the escape. Damn." He studied the tactical display, calculating odds that weren't in their favor. "We can't outrun them all, not with the engine damage." "Then we don't run," Nix said firmly. She moved to the co-pilot's station, her fingers dancing over the controls with surprising familiarity. "I've been studying your ship's systems. If we reroute power from life support to the engines, we'll suffocate before we reach the nearest inhabited system. Not if we make it to that asteroid field." She pointed to a cluster of rocks on the edge of the sensor grid. "We could hide there, make repairs." Joran considered it. The asteroid field was dense, treacherous. One wrong move, and they'd be pasted on a rock. But staying here meant certain death or capture. "Hold on," he said, engaging the engines. The Wanderer leaped forward just as the first Syndicate patrol ship rounded a nearby moon. Energy bolts lanced through space where they'd been moments before, and suddenly the void erupted with pursuing ships. Nix proved to be an exceptional co-pilot, anticipating Joran's maneuvers and managing ship's systems with an intuitive understanding. That amazed him when he rolled to avoid a missile spread. She was already adjusting the inertial dampeners when he pushed the engines past redline. She found extra power reserves he didn't even know existed. "There," she pointed to a gap between two massive asteroids. "Can you thread it?" "Can I thread it?" Joran grinned, his earlier nervousness replaced by the exhilaration of a challenge. "Watch me." The Wanderer dove into the asteroid field like a needle threading silk. Behind them, the larger Syndicate ships were forced to slow down, their bulk making them clumsy among the floating rocks. One fighter tried to follow and became an expanding cloud of debris. When it clipped a tumbling asteroid dot, they found sanctuary in the shadow of a particularly large rock, its mineral composition masking their heat signature. As the Syndicate ships swept past, hunting for prey that had vanished, Joran and Nix sat in the darkened cockpit, listening to their own breathing. "That was either brilliant flying or brilliant luck," Nix said softly. "Little of both," Joran admitted. In the dim light from the instrument panels, Her alien features were ethereally beautiful. "You're pretty good at this yourself. Not bad for a scout." Nix smiled, and the expression transformed her face completely. "I wasn't always a scout. Before I joined the Collective's exploration service, I was a pilot in our defense fleet." "What made you switch?" Her expression grew distant again. "I wanted to see what lay beyond our borders. My people thought I was foolish. Why seek the unknown when we had perfection at home?" She touched the wound at her side absently. "Perhaps they were right." "Hey." Joran reached out, gently covering her hand with his. "You're one of the finest pilots I've ever flown with, and I've seen a lot of space. Don't let fear make you doubt yourself." Nix stared down at their joined hands, her pale purple fingers intertwined with his darker human ones. "Your people are so different from mine. You touch so freely, trust so easily. Maybe that's not such a bad thing." She looked up at him, and Joran saw something shift in those luminous eyes, walls coming down, barriers dissolving. "No," she said quietly, "perhaps it isn't." They spent the next several hours working together to repair the ship, and Joran found himself constantly amazed by Nix's quick mind and steady hands. She approached problems from angles he'd never considered, her alien perspective offering solutions that were both elegant and effective. "Your people's technology," he said as she recalibrated the navigation computer with impossible precision. "It's based on biological principles, isn't it? Everything is connected," she replied, not looking up from her work. "Energy, matter, consciousness, all part of the same vast web. Your human machines try to dominate and control. Ours seek harmony and cooperation." "Sounds peaceful." "It can be." Her voice carried a note of sadness, but it can also be stifling. "Individual desires must always yield to collective harmony. The scent is seen as disease. Is that why you're out here alone?" Nix's hands stilled on the controls. "I volunteered for this mission partly because it meant leaving home. The Council of Arbiters has been concerned about my recent behaviors." "What kind of behaviors?" "Questions. Doubts about whether isolation truly serves our people's best interests." She finally looked at him. "Friendship with humans like the traitor captain who helped evacuate our colony from syndicate raiders last year." Joran felt his heart skip. "You've met other humans?" "Captain Marcus Webb. His ship was passing through our space when the raiders hit. He could have simply continued on his way, but instead he stayed to help." She smiled at the memory. "He was much like you, willing to risk himself for strangers. And the Arbiters didn't approve. They believed his assistance corrupted the purity of our response to crisis. That relying on outsiders showed weakness." Her voice hardened. "I disagreed. Publicly. Hence the solo mission to investigate syndicate activity, a chance to prove that cooperation between species can benefit everyone." She laughed bitterly. "Instead, I've managed to get myself nearly killed and embroil an innocent human in collective politics." Joran moved closer, close enough to smell the strange but pleasant scent she carried like ozone and starlight. "NYX, you didn't embroil me in anything. I chose to help you. Just like Captain Webb chose to help your people. That's what decent beings do for each other." She stared at him with an expression of wonder, as if he'd revealed some profound truth. "How do you make it sound so simple?" "Because it is simple." He reached up to brush a strand of that impossible hair from her face. "Some things are worth the risk." The proximity alarms chose that moment to sound again, softer this time, indicating a single ship rather than a fleet. They rushed to the sensor station, where the display showed a familiar configuration approaching their hiding spot. "That's a collective scout ship," Nix breathed. "They've come looking for me." "Is that good or bad?" Nix's expression was troubled. "I'm not sure. If the Arbiters sent them." She trailed off, but Joran could guess what she wasn't saying. Her people might not be happy about her association with a human. "We'll face whatever comes," he said firmly. Together, Nix turned to him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "Joran, you don't understand what you're offering. The Collective doesn't. Forgive those who transgress against their laws. Then we'll just have to make sure they see the truth," he replied. "That what's happening between us isn't transgression, it's evolution." The Collective scout ship Serenity's edge hung motionless beside the asteroid where they'd hidden, its organic curves gleaming like polished bone in the starlight. Unlike human vessels with their angular construction and obvious weapon mounts, the ethereal ship seemed almost alive, which Joran realized as he watched it pulse gently with bioluminescent patterns. It probably was. "That's Captain Thane's ship," Nyx said, relief evident in her voice as she recognized the vessel's unique biosignature. "He's a friend, someone who understands the value of looking beyond our borders." The communication panel crackled to life, and a melodious voice filled the cockpit, clearly ethereal, with those same harmonic undertones that made Nyx's speech so captivating. "Scout Valdris, this is Captain Thane aboard Serenity's Edge. Are you safe?" Nyx activated the transmitter, responding in her own language, a flowing series of tones that sounded more like music than speech. Joran watched her face as she spoke, noting the tension around her eyes, the careful way she chose her words. "I've told him I'm uninjured and that you aided in my escape from Syndicate forces." She translated for Joran. "He's requesting permission to come aboard your ship." "Your call," Joran said, though he couldn't suppress a flutter of nervousness. Meeting Nyx's people felt like crossing a threshold from which there might be no return. 20 minutes later, Captain Thane materialized in the Wanderer's cargo bay in a shimmer of silver light, some kind of advanced transporter technology that left Joran's instruments unable to detect the transfer until it was complete. The ethereal captain was tall even by his species standards, with skin that shifted between deep blue and violet, and hair like spun platinum that moved with its own current. His eyes, a striking golden color, fixed on Joran with frank curiosity. "So," Thane said in accented but perfect standard, "you are the human who rescued our Nyx from the raiders." "I just happened to be in the right place at the right time," Joran replied, extending his hand in the human gesture of greeting. Thane looked at the offered hand for a moment, then clasped it. His skin was warmer than Joran had expected, with a faint tingle that might have been bioelectric. "Modest," Thane observed, glancing at Nyx with what might have been amusement. "I can see why you find him intriguing." Nyx's skin deepened to a darker purple, what Joran was beginning to recognize as her equivalent of a blush. "Thane, peace, little sister. I'm not here to judge." The captain's expression grew serious. "Though I'm afraid others will. Word of your association has reached the Council of Arbiters." "How?" Nyx demanded. "I sent no reports." The Syndicate raider we captured during the evacuation of Kepler-4 for to see talked. Before his interrogation was complete, he mentioned a human male protecting an ethereal female, described your ship's configuration. Thane's golden eyes found Joran again. "The Arbiters are concerned about contamination protocols." "Contamination?" Joran felt anger flare. "I saved her life, and for that, you have our eternal gratitude," Thane said calmly. "But my people fear that close contact with other species will lead us away from our pure evolutionary path. They see emotion as weakness, especially certain kinds of emotion." Joran looked at Nyx, understanding dawning. "They know." She nodded miserably. "Ethereals are empathic to varying degrees. Strong emotions create psychic resonance that's difficult to hide. If they've sent a full council investigation team, they'll sense what's developing between you immediately," Thane finished, "and they will not approve." Over the next several hours, as they traveled toward the rendezvous coordinates Thane provided, Joran learned more about ethereal society than any human before him. They were an ancient race, having achieved interstellar travel when humans were still discovering fire. Their evolution had followed a path toward collective consciousness and psychic unity goals that required careful genetic and cultural purity. Individual desires are seen as discord in the greater harmony, Nyx explained as they sat together in the Wanderer's small observation deck, watching the stars wheel past. "Love between different species is considered the ultimate corruption, mixing pure ethereal essence with alien thoughts and feelings." "But you don't believe that," Joran said. "It wasn't a question." "I used to." She leaned against him, her head fitting perfectly against his shoulder. "My training taught me that other species were inferior, that contact with them would diminish what we are. But then I met Captain Webb, saw his courage and compassion, and now I've met you." She turned in his arms, her luminous eyes meeting his. "And I understand that love doesn't diminish us, it expands us." Joran cupped her face gently. marveling at the warmth of her skin, the way those bioluminescent patterns pulsed faster when he touched her. "Nix, whatever happens with your people, I want you to know," she silenced him with a kiss, her lips soft and warm against his. The sensation was electric. Literally tiny charges danced between them, a manifestation of her species' bioelectric nature. When they broke apart, both were breathing heavily. "I know," she whispered. "I feel it too." They spent that night learning each other's stories. Nix spoke of growing up in the crystal spires of Synthesis Prime, of a childhood surrounded by collective harmony but lacking individual expression. She described the moment she first questioned her society's teachings, watching a sunset alone, and realizing that beauty was more profound when experienced individually, rather than shared through the psychic collective. Joren told her about his own past growing up on the frontier world of New Montana, losing his parents to a syndicate raid when he was 16, spending years working cargo ships before finally saving enough to buy the Wanderer. His choice to live as an independent trader was its own form of rebellion against a galaxy that seemed determined to force everyone into predetermined roles. "We're both outcasts," Nix observed, tracing the lines of his palm with her fingertip. "Neither fully belonging to the worlds that made us. Maybe that's why we found each other." Joren replied, "The universe has a way of bringing the right people together at the right time." As the ship's chronometer advanced toward ship's dawn, they discovered that physical intimacy between their species was not only possible but transcendent. The bioelectric nature of Nix's physiology created sensations unlike anything Joren had experienced. Each touch was amplified. Each caress became a symphony of sensation that seemed to resonate through every nerve ending. More than that, he could feel her emotions as clearly as his own, her wonder at their connection, her fear of what tomorrow might bring, her growing love for him that matched his own feelings with startling intensity. "Is this what your people's psychic bonding is like?" he asked as they lay entwined, her silver hair spread across his chest like liquid starlight. "No," she said softly. "This is something new, something unprecedented." She lifted her head to look at him. "I can feel your thoughts, your emotions, but they remain uniquely yours. It's not the collective harmony my people prize, it's something richer, a symphony instead of a single note. The arbiters won't see it that way. No, they won't." Her expression grew determined. "But perhaps it's time someone showed them that evolution isn't always about maintaining purity. Sometimes it's about embracing change." The next morning brought their arrival at the rendezvous point, a neutral space station, orbiting a dead star, one of the few places where collective ships were permitted to interact with outsiders. As they approached, Joren could see other vessels, waiting, sleek ethereal ships that seemed more grown than built, and among them, a larger vessel that made Nix stiffen with recognition. The Harmony's voice, she breathed. "The Arbiter's flagship." "How many Arbiters?" Joren asked, checking his ship's defensive systems out of habit. "All of them," Nix replied grimly. "The full council." "Joren, you have to understand these are among the most powerful individuals in collective society. Their psychic abilities are beyond anything you can imagine. Are you afraid of them?" Nix was quiet for a long moment. "Yes," she admitted, "but not for myself. I'm afraid of what they might do to you." Joren took her hand, squeezing gently. "Whatever happens, we face it together." "Together," she agreed, though her eyes remained troubled as they approached the station. Neither of them noticed the sensor ghost trailing in their wake, a syndicate stealth ship that had been following their psychic emanations across half the galaxy, its captain hungry for revenge against the alien who had cost him so many ships. Korath was coming, and he intended to finish what he'd started at the mining station. The space station Haven's Rest was a monument to neutral territory, a massive cylindrical structure where representatives from across the galaxy could meet without fear of political complications. As the Wanderer docked, Joren could see the distinctive bioships of the ethereal collective arranged in a precise formation around the station's outer ring. Their organic curves seemed to pulse with anticipation, like predators waiting to strike. "They're beautiful," he admitted to Nix as they watched through the viewport. "And deadly," she replied grimly. "Each one is bonded to its captain's consciousness. In combat, they move like extensions of their pilot's will." Her hand found his. "Promise me something, Joran, if this goes badly. If the Arbiters reject what we've found together, don't try to fight them. Just run. I'm not leaving you. You may not have a choice." The docking bay was a study in contrast sterile human engineering surrounding them, while elegant ethereal forms moved with fluid grace. Through the corridors, Joran noted the way other species representatives stepped aside as the collective delegation passed, showing the mixture of respect and fear that the ancient race commanded. High Arbiter Velen was waiting for them in the station's central conference chamber, along with 4 other members of the collective's ruling council. Joran had expected beings of terrible power and coldness, but the assembled arbiters appeared almost fragile, tall, and willowy, with skin that seemed translucent in the chamber's soft lighting. Only their eyes betrayed their true nature, deep, ancient, and filled with an intelligence that seemed to look straight through to the soul. Scout Valdris, Arbiter Velen spoke, her voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate in Joran's bones. "You have caused quite a disturbance." Nyx stepped forward, her spine straight despite the obvious psychic pressure being exerted by the assembled council. "High Arbiter, I have completed my mission. The syndicate threat in the Outer Rim has been assessed and contained. That is not why we are here, child." Velen's gaze shifted to Joran, and he felt a probing sensation in his mind, gentle but insistent, like fingers rifling through his memories. "This human, you have formed an attachment." "I have formed a partnership," Nyx corrected firmly, "one that proved essential to the mission's success. Do not dissemble with us." Another arbiter spoke, an elderly male whose skin had taken on an almost crystalline quality. "We can feel the psychic resonance between you. The contamination runs deep." Joran felt anger flare at the word contamination, but before he could speak, Nyx placed a restraining hand on his arm. Through their growing bond, he could feel her emotions, fear, yes, but also determination and something that might have been hope. "If by contamination you mean love," she said clearly, "then yes, I love this human, and he loves me. Our bond has made us both stronger, not weaker." The chamber fell silent. The assembled arbiters exchanged glances that spoke of psychic communication, far beyond human perception. Joran could feel the weight of their combined attention like a physical presence. "Love." Arbiter Velen repeated the word as if tasting something bitter. "An emotional construct that leads to irrationality, possessiveness, violence. How many wars have been fought over this love you praise, and how many acts of heroism?" Joran finally spoke, his voice steady despite the oppressive psychic atmosphere. "How many sacrifices made for something greater than oneself? You see love as weakness, but I've seen it inspire strength beyond measure. You speak of things you do not understand, human." The elderly arbiter's mental voice was sharp with disdain. "Your species has barely begun to evolve beyond its primitive origins. What could you possibly offer one of our kind?" Before Joran could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the station. Emergency lights bathed the chamber in harsh red as automated voices announced, "Hull breach detected. Unknown vessels attacking Docking Bay 7. All security personnel, respond immediately." Through the chamber's transparent walls, they could see explosions blooming like deadly flowers around the station's outer ring. Syndicate raiders were swarming from concealment, their weapons focused on the collective bioships with devastating effect. Korath, Nyx breathed, recognizing the lead vessel's configuration. "Who?" Arbiter Velen demanded. "Syndicate warlord. He's been hunting me since I disrupted his operations in the Outer Rim." Nyx was already moving toward the chamber's exit. "He must have followed us here. The treaty." One of the younger arbiters protested. "This is neutral space. They cannot attack here." "The Syndicate doesn't recognize treaties," Joran said grimly, checking his sidearm. "Korath is after revenge, and he'll kill anyone who gets in his way." More explosions rocked the station. Through their bond, Joran could feel Nyx's distress as she watched collective ships being destroyed by the surprise attack. These were her people, regardless of their disapproval of her choices. "I have to help them," she said, turning to the arbiters. "Grant me permission to use the station's defensive systems." "Absolutely not," Velen replied coldly. "You have already brought disgrace upon our people. We will not compound it by allowing you to participate in violence. Then people will die, that is not our concern. The collective does not involve itself in the conflicts of lesser species. Joran saw the anguish in Nyx's eyes, torn between her love for her people and her horror at their willingness to let innocents die for the sake of maintaining their perceived purity. The decision, when it came to him, was surprisingly easy. "Then I'll do it," he said, heading for the door. "Joran, no," Nyx caught his arm. "The station's defenses are controlled from the central computer core. It's heavily shielded. You'll never make it through alone." "I won't be alone." He looked at her meaningfully. "We're bonded now. Remember, whatever abilities that gives you, I'm willing to share the risk." Understanding dawned in her luminous eyes. Among the ethereals, psychic bonding allowed for the sharing of mental abilities, and she possessed talents her people had spent centuries developing. "The danger," she began. "Some things are worth the risk," he interrupted, echoing his words. From their first meeting, Nyx nodded, her expression firming with resolve. She turned to the assembled arbiters. "I invoke the right of necessity. My actions here serve the greater good, regardless of personal consequences." "You invoke a right that has not been used in 1,000 years, Velen warned. "The penalty for failure is exile from the collective forever." "Then I won't fail." They ran through the station's corridors as chaos erupted around them. Syndicate boarding parties had breached the outer hull, and the sounds of battle echoed from multiple levels. Joran's tactical training kicked in as he led them through maintenance passages and service tunnels, avoiding the main confrontations while making their way toward the central core. "There." Nyx pointed to a heavily armored door marked with warning symbols in multiple languages. "The core chamber is beyond that portal." The door was locked down under emergency protocols, its access panel dark. Joran was reaching for his plasma cutter when Nyx stopped him. "Let me try something," she said, placing her palm flat against the panel. Her skin began to glow with that characteristic bioluminescence, energy dancing between her fingers as she interfaced directly with the station's computer systems. "I didn't know you could do that," Joran said, watching in fascination. "Neither did I," Nyx admitted, her face tight with concentration. "Our bond, it's allowing me to access abilities I've never possessed before. You're making me stronger, just as I hoped." The door cycled open with a hydraulic hiss, revealing the station's nerve center, a circular chamber filled with crystalline processing nodes and holographic displays. At its heart stood the central command console, currently locked down under security protocols. "I can unlock the defensive systems," Nyx said, approaching the console, "but channeling that much energy through the bond." She looked at him with concern. "It could kill us both." Outside, they could hear the battle intensifying. More ships were dying, their crews paying the price for Korath's vendetta against them both. "Do it," Joran said firmly. "I trust you." NYX placed both hands on the console, her entire body beginning to glow as she connected with the station's massive computer core. Through their bond, Joran felt the incredible rush of information flooding through her consciousness sensor data, targeting solutions, power distribution networks. It was overwhelming, too much for any single mind to process, but they weren't single minds anymore. Joran stepped up behind her, placing his hands over hers on the console. Their bond flared to brilliant life as their consciousness merged, his human intuition and tactical awareness combining with her ethereal precision and psychic abilities. Together, they became something greater than the sum of their parts. The station's defensive systems came online with a deep harmonic vibration that seemed to shake reality itself. Massive energy weapons emerged from concealed ports, their targeting guided by the perfect fusion of human instinct and ethereal calculation. The first volley caught Korath's forces completely by surprise, vaporizing 3 Raider ships in brilliant explosions. But the effort was taking its toll. Joran felt his life force being drawn into the station's systems, channeled through Nyx's abilities to power weapons that normally required fusion reactors to operate. He could feel her distress through their bond. She was trying to shield him from the worst of the drain, taking the burden onto herself. "Together," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the energy discharge. "We do this together." He opened himself completely to their bond, sharing not just his strength, but his memories, his hopes, his absolute faith in her. The gesture seemed to transform the very nature of their connection. What had been a sharing became a true fusion, their separate selves merging into something unprecedented in ethereal experience. The station's weapons fired again, this time with devastating accuracy that defied probability. Korath's flagship, a massive dreadnought that had been systematically destroying collective ships, found itself targeted by every defensive system simultaneously. The warlord's last transmission was a roar of frustrated rage before his ship disappeared in a miniature star dot as the surviving syndicate forces fled in disarray. Joran and Nyx collapsed together beside the console, their merged consciousness slowly separating back into individual awareness. Both were pale, drained by the incredible energies they had channeled, but alive. "Did we?" Joran began. "We won," Nyx confirmed, her voice weak but triumphant. "The station is safe. Your people, my people, they're all safe." Through the chamber's viewports, they could see collective bioships moving to assist damaged vessels and pursue the fleeing raiders. The immediate crisis was over. But as they heard footsteps approaching the core chamber, they both knew their personal reckoning was just beginning. The Arbiters had witnessed their fusion, an act that challenged everything the collective believed about the purity of their species. What happened next would determine not just their fate, but possibly the future relationship between their peoples. High Arbiter Velen appeared in the doorway, her ancient eyes unreadable as she looked down at the two figures huddled together beside the console. "So," she said quietly, "this is what evolution looks like." The Great Council chamber aboard the Harmony's voice was a marvel of ethereal architecture, living crystal walls that pulsed with bioluminescent patterns, gravity fields that allowed the assembled delegates to float at various levels throughout the spherical space, and at its heart, a holographic representation of the galaxy itself, slowly spinning in all its spiral majesty. Joren stood in the center of it all, acutely aware that he was likely the first human ever to set foot aboard an ethereal flagship. Around him, dozens of the galaxy's most powerful beings floated in contemplative silence, their ancient eyes fixed upon him with expressions ranging from curiosity to outright hostility. Beside him, Nyx maintained the formal posture required of a collective scout under tribunal, but through their bond he could feel her inner turmoil. The fusion they had achieved to save the station had fundamentally changed something between them. Where once they had shared emotions and thoughts, now they seemed to exist as two facets of a single consciousness. The Arbiters could sense it, too, and that was the problem. "The evidence is unprecedented," High Arbiter Velen announced, her voice carrying through the chamber without need for amplification. "Never before has an ethereal formed such a deep psychic bond with an alien species. The implications for our understanding of consciousness itself are profound." "Profound and dangerous," interjected Arbiter Corvain, an ancient male whose crystalline skin had taken on an almost diamond-like hardness over his millennia of life. "This fusion represents everything we have sought to avoid. Contamination of the pure ethereal consciousness with alien thought patterns." Another Arbiter drifted closer, a younger female named Liz, whose skin showed the deep purple hues that indicated recent evolutionary advancement. Yet the tactical advantages displayed during the station's defense cannot be ignored. The fusion of human intuition with ethereal psychic abilities created capabilities neither species possesses alone. Are we now to judge our evolution by military applications? Corvain's mental voice carried sharp disapproval. "We are not a warrior race." "No," said a new voice, and all eyes turned to Captain Thane as he entered the chamber. "But we are a race that values truth. And the truth is that what Scout Valdris and Traitor Kane have achieved represents a new form of consciousness, one that enhances, rather than diminishes both participants." Joran felt Nyx's surprise through their bond. Thane was risking his own standing to speak for them, something she hadn't expected given the political pressures involved. "Captain Thane," Arbiter Velen acknowledged, "you have studied the phenomenon at close range. Share your observations." Thane moved to float at the same level as the senior Arbiters, his expression serious but not apologetic. "I have been monitoring their psychic resonance since the rescue at Kepler-4 to see. What I found defies our traditional understanding of mental contamination. Rather than the human consciousness corrupting Scout Valdris's ethereal nature, the two have achieved a symbiotic Enhancement. Explain, Velen commanded. Scout Valdris retains her essential ethereal nature, her psychic sensitivity, her connection to the collective unconscious of our people, her ability to interface with biotechnology. But these abilities have been expanded, refined by her exposure to human cognitive patterns. The human tendency toward individual creativity and tactical improvisation has unlocked potential in her that we never knew existed. And the human, asked Arbiter Liss, studying Joran with obvious curiosity, has gained access to psychic abilities that should be impossible for his species, Thane continued. But more than that, through the bond, he has become capable of truly understanding our people in ways no alien ever has before. Arbiter Corvain's expression remains skeptical. You speak of enhancement, but at what cost? Look at them, they can barely exist as separate entities anymore. Is this evolution or devolution? Perhaps, said Joran, speaking for the first time since the tribunal began. The question isn't whether we can exist separately, but whether we should want to. The chamber fell silent. The audacity of a human addressing the Council of Arbiters directly was unprecedented, but Joran felt Nyx's support flowing through their bond, giving him strength. You see our union as contamination, he continued, his voice steady despite the weight of all those ancient eyes upon him. But from where I stand, it looks like completion. Nyx hasn't become less ethereal. Because of our bond, she's become more herself than she ever was before. And I've found a part of myself I never knew was missing. Pretty words, Corvain sneered. But words do not address the fundamental issue. If other ethereals begin forming such bonds, what becomes of our collective consciousness? What becomes of our purity? What if purity was never the point? Nyx spoke for the first time, her voice carrying the harmonic overtones that marked her as a true daughter of the collective. What if evolution isn't about maintaining what we are, but about becoming what we could be? A ripple of shock went through the assembled arbiters. To question the fundamental principles of collective philosophy was heresy of the highest order. You forget yourself, Scout Valdris, Velen warned. Our purity is what separates us from the chaos and violence that marks the lesser species, is it? Nyx challenged. Or is it what separates us from the growth and discovery that could make us something greater? She gestured to the holographic galaxy spinning between them. Look at it, all of you. Billions of stars, trillions of worlds, countless forms of life and consciousness. And we hide on our perfect worlds, convinced that isolation equals superiority. NYX. Joran whispered through their bond, sensing the dangerous ground she was treading. No, she replied, both aloud and through their connection. It needs to be said. She turned to address the full council. I have seen what lies beyond our borders. I have fought beside humans, laughed with them, loved one of them, and through that love, I have become more than I ever was in isolation. You have become corrupted, Corvain stated flatly. I have become complete, Nyx corrected. And so could our entire species, if we had the courage to reach beyond ourselves. The debate that followed raged for hours. Some arbiters spoke of maintaining the old ways, of the dangers of contamination and the necessity of purity. Others, led by Liss and a growing faction of younger council members, argued that perhaps the time had come to reconsider their isolation. Through it all, Joran found himself amazed by the passion and intellect on display. These beings had wrestled with questions of consciousness and evolution for millennia, and watching them debate was like observing philosophy made manifest. Finally, High Arbiter Velen called for silence. The ancient being floated in the chamber's center, her expression unreadable as she studied both Joran and Nyx. The question before us, she said slowly, is not whether what you have achieved is possible. Clearly it is. The question is whether it is desirable, whether the collective should embrace such changes or reject them as threats to our essential nature. And how will you decide? Nyx asked. Velen smiled, an expression that transformed her alien features into something almost warm. We already have, she said. By your demonstration of trust and courage in defending the station, you have proven that your bond serves the greater good. The Council has voted to officially recognize your union and establish protocols for future human ethereal partnerships. Joran felt his knees nearly buckle with relief. Through their bond, He could sense Nyx's joy mixing with his own until he couldn't tell where his emotions ended and hers began. However, Velan continued, and the word fell like a hammer. Such recognition comes with conditions. You will serve as ambassadors between our peoples, living proof that cooperation benefits both species. Your bond will be studied, documented, and used as a template for future diplomatic relations. In other words, Arbiter Corvain said sourly, you will be exhibited like curiosities. Your every moment analyzed for the benefit of science. Or, said Captain Thane with a grin, you'll be pioneering a new age of interspecies cooperation. The choice of perspective is yours. As the council began to disperse, floating away to discuss the implications of their decision, High Arbiter Velan approached them directly. I have one final gift for you, she said, extending a small crystalline device toward Nyx. This is a bioship seed, one of our most closely guarded secrets. When planted in suitable growing medium, it will mature into a vessel bonded specifically to your merged consciousness. Nyx accepted the gift with trembling hands. High Arbiter, I don't understand. Why? Because, child, you are no longer bound by the limitations of either species. Your ship should reflect that freedom. Velan turned to Joran. As for you, human, I sense that your wandering days are far from over. This will ensure you travel them in comfort and safety. 6 months later, Joran stood on the observation deck of their new bioship Unity's Dream, watching the binary sunset of New Harmony, a frontier world where human and ethereal colonists worked side by side to build something unprecedented. The ship itself was a marvel, its organic curves housing technology that responded to their thoughts and desires with an intelligence that seemed almost sentient. Nyx joined him at the view screen, her hand finding his with the natural ease of long familiarity. Through their bond, he could feel her contentment, not the artificial harmony imposed by the collective, but the genuine peace that came from choosing one's own path. Any regrets? He asked, watching human and ethereal children playing together in the colony's central plaza below. Only that it took us so long to find each other, she replied, leaning into his embrace. In the distance, more ships were arriving, representatives from dozens of species who had heard about the New Harmony project and wanted to see if such cooperation was truly possible. The galaxy was changing, one friendship at a time. So, Joran said, pulling up the ship's navigation display. Where to next, Ambassador Valdriscain? Nyx smiled, her bioluminescent patterns pulsing with happiness. Wherever the stars take us. Husband, we have a universe to explore. The Unity's Dream rose into the night sky, its bioluminescent hull painting patterns of light across the darkness. Behind them, New Harmony continued its work of proving that some bonds transcended species, politics, and the vast loneliness of space itself. In the end, love had won, not through conquest or domination, but through the simple recognition that consciousness, in all its myriad forms, was meant to grow and evolve and reach towards something greater than itself. They had fought well, but they were no longer alone, and neither was the galaxy.